So when the computer had crashed, but I didn't know it had crashed, I only knew that your screen was frozen, and so I decided to continue jawboning. And we were talking about the territorial instinct and how uh, many territories were naturally formed because of oceans and mountains and rivers would be one. Rivers not so much because they tend over time to change courses, and also many rivers are not that much of a boundary anyway, what with a boat or two.
Mm.
So the natural boundaries, though, have been divvied up according to men's thinking. And all of these other boundaries are, in fact, artificial and need to be guarded. Now, this is an important point because, as we were saying about the conceptualization of the boundaries, because the humans have a whole new set of territories, an intellectual set of territories that we are instinctively attached to, just like natural boundaries and our territorial instincts. So we are instinctually, and it's also bound up with the herding instinct. It's instinctual for us to join a political party as opposed to joining the other political party. But once we join a political party, if anyone joins a political party, perhaps not you or me because we're too smart to do that, but if we were to join a political party, then when that political party has something good happen, we feel good. But every time something bad happens to that political party, we're going to feel bad. Which means we are now, if we are attached to it in a territorial sense, then the vicissitudes of the territory are now me. I am the vicissitudes of the territory.
This is a big thing in England with football teams.
Can you adjust your mic a little? You're a little bit low volume.
Okay. Do you want it up like this?
That's not yet. No, it's still weak.
Oh, okay.
Now
I'll
it's
boost
good
it.
enough. If you can be close to your mic, that'll be good enough.
Yeah, I'll boost it. This is a big thing in England with football, soccer teams. And it was one thing that I caught on very quickly and how absurd it was when I was quite young. And obviously it didn't make me too popular. But it was when people say, "Oh, we've done so bad in the league," and I'm like thinking, you didn't
Yeah.
play, you know. Um, but yeah, that's one thing I caught onto.
Right, yeah. My football team, or my high school's football team, which is the same thing. But
Mm,
in that regard, let us talk about it in the sense of a professional team. That professional team actually does have an owner.
okay, I boosted the microphone.
That's good. Okay, that football team does actually have an owner who has legitimate right to call it his, or it may be a consortium or a group. You could also say that the people who work for that football team could call it mine because it's employer and they've got close relation, and the players also. But the fans, sorry, none of the group that I just mentioned know about any of those fans in particular, not me, the fan. They just see them as a crowd out there. And in that way, they're the other. Even the fans of this football team are the other, as opposed to who is the football team. And so they are there to be exploited, not to be brought into the team. And yet these guys will stand in the bar arguing with each other about my team does this and my team does that, and it's not your team. It doesn't belong to you, sorry. Not only that, but anybody who does own that team doesn't want anything to do with you, especially right now. And so this is the attachment, though, that we have that comes out of that territorial instinct that is actually an extension of the nesting instinct. And the nesting instinct is a natural outcome of the procreation instinct, but the procreation instinct has really got an interesting twist to it. And that is the point that Bhikkhu Buddhadasa makes so explicitly is that the humans have become materialistic. We own things the way that other animals don't own things. That if a dog picks up something in his mouth and walks away with it, you better believe that he's going to go chew on it someplace close by. He's just getting it away from so he can do it in private and security. But if he can't gnaw on it, he's not interested. The same thing about monkeys, that monkeys have many, many traits about getting little worms and grubs and how to coax them out. And one would be like taking a reed or a little twig and putting it down into the hole and then feeling it until the grub starts to pull it, and then you pull it out. But once the grub is gotten by the monkey, he throws the stick away. He's not interested. I think the first thing that humans ever grasped hold of was fire, a stick that was on fire, because that's possibly the most precious thing. Once the humans saw that fire and recognized what a precious thing it is, we'll keep it. And so they go around now with a stick that's got a fire going at the other end of it. And this was the beginning of civilization. But there's also the possibility that the guy who was banging on a stick, or excuse me, on a bone to get the marrow out of it with a rock, decided to keep that rock. It was especially good at banging on bones. But somewhere deep, deep in our past, we became materialist. We decided that we were going to carry our tools around with us. The next thing you know, we're putting a sharp rock on the end of a long stick. We got a spear. We tie a rock to a foot-long stick, and now we've got a hand axe, and off we go. And all of a sudden, that clock ticks by 1,000,000 years, and now we're just in the same exact position, except we're holding a cell phone instead of that spear. But we haven't made a whole lot of improvements in our understanding of materialism. We've gotten just more and more and more materialist. And so once we own something, we have the idea that we own it, where in fact, no, at best, we're going to be a caretaker of it, and it owns us. An example is you buy a house. If you buy a house, everybody who buys a house thinks they own the house. But no, the house owns them now. The house expects them to make the mortgage payment. If the toilet clogs up, they expect the new owner, him, to fix the toilet. Another example of it is the dogs here. Somebody will ask, are these your dogs? And I say, no, I'm their alpha.
There's a good joke with cats. It boils down to that the cat owns the humans, the human doesn't own the cat.
That's true with houses, dogs, everything. And in a way, you could even go so far as to say this guy who's in the bar arguing about my football team, in a way, the team owns him, not he owns the team. Why? Because every time that team scores, he's jumping up and down. And every time they lose a point, he's disappointed and upset. So his heart is actually ruled now by that team. So if you're going to then become free, we have to detach ourselves from everything that we identify with.
The line hook, line, and sinker came to mind to me.
How does hook, line, and sinker fit in?
To be honest, I might have to look at its history up later.
History, huh?
You know, it's for me. It's just so associated with events that happen rather than me knowing what it actually means.
Okay, all right.
I know it contextually.
Hook, line, and sinker is the line. The sinker is a little weight. They didn't talk about the float. So if they were going to make a whole analogy, they may even have the rod, the line, hook, sinker, and float. But they're talking about putting things together. Another one, that example would be lock, stock, and barrel,
Yeah.
because the lock is all of the mechanical equipment. Because, in fact, the whole idea of having um, guns do that kind of stuff comes from lock makers, and so they build the lock. It's got the trigger and all of that mechanism on it. So, um, meanwhile, back to the territory
Mm.
and its relationship with the others. We've now covered actually four of them, but we only mentioned one, and that is that the territorial instinct is basically in service to the nesting instinct, and the nesting instinct is basically in service to the procreation instinct. But the procreation instinct has now gone wild in the sense of, oh, but you see it in the animal world, the preening that peacocks will do, or the building of a nest in order to attract a mate for the bird. So birds have become materialistic. In fact, I think it's the blackbird in America, a crow, is known to be materialistic. That they'll
Yeah.
steal shiny objects and take it to their nest. Okay, so this nesting instinct that this materialistic instinct also goes really, really deep. But animals don't do it quite the way that humans do. We're the ones who actually, not because it's shiny or whatever, but because we do it like the blackbirds in service of attracting a mate. In fact, automobiles are often called a chick magnet. Have you heard that phrase ever?
Yeah.
It got started back in the 50s, when big time, when the automobile manufacturers would stand a pretty woman with a very, very high quality evening gown beside the thing while it all ran around on a turntable, giving the ideas that, oh, you buy the car, you get the girl free.
Oh, there's a good. I'm a big, well, not a big fan. I used to be a big fan of the classic Simpsons, and there used to be there's a classic scene where everybody's entering a raffle to win a car,
Uh-huh.
and there's this beautiful woman standing next to it, and every man in the line asks her, "Do you come with a car?" She's like, "Oh, you," and then laughs. But this huge line, everybody asks the same question. It's
Hmm.
quite funny.
Well, but you can see that that actually is part of our instinctual nature, that we tend to gather together items in order to make us look bigger or better or whatever like that. And another quality of it, especially when it comes to weapons, is because we feel safe. The guy walking through the wilderness or through the woods will feel safer with an axe or with a spear or at least a knife, but completely unarmed, and now we feel at danger. Humans live that kind of life for as long as we've been living as humans, minus about, what, 100 years or less. That in fact, even 200 years ago, very rarely would a man walk around unarmed.
Yeah.
That everybody's got at least a dagger, if not a sword.
In I mean, knowing my Irish history for some reason, they used to walk around with canes, like walking sticks. They
Sticks,
called them an
and you open the
ash
walking
plants,
stick, and it's a sword.
and it's a samurai sword. Yeah.
Well, it's a very
Well, yeah,
slender
yeah.
silhouette, kind of closer to a fencing sword. It's
Mm.
not a samurai. No, those things are heavy duty. They'll slice a tree in one blow. You don't need that kind of thing. So, but it's all about self defense because of the inherent feeling of danger.
Mm.
This inherent feeling of danger is, in fact, the self preservation instinct. And so that's the primary mode of clinging, is clinging to the things that we associated with keeping me alive and keeping me safe, which then gives rise to the other three secondary um, instincts, and that the Buddha puts these together. One thing he does, uh, to be honest with you, the term um, underlying tendencies is used in several suttas and not always in the same way, but it is pointing at these four modes of clinging. These four modes of clinging are the underlying tendencies, and the Buddha's word for underlying tendency sounds like the word instinct to me.
Yeah, I can see that self-preservation instinct when I'm going to 7-Eleven. You know, before I leave, I'll have my key. I'll have my keys, put them in pocket. Do I need anything else? And I look at my phone, and I think I could use that to call you know, emergency services or something if anything happens, or if I come across anything like an injured person. You know, even though I probably wouldn't do it because I don't speak Thai very well. But you know, that's the thought, that's the reasoning that comes to mind before I leave my flat to go to 7-Eleven.
Like India, Thais are not known for street violence. It's not part of the culture here. They're a whole lot more sneaky about it. You got to be really careful about and aware of people who are trying to talk you into going someplace with them. But people who are just passing by, it's unlikely for them to rob you. They're not violent. They're sneaky. It's part of the culture. You know this. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. That in fact, Thailand has been a naturally non-violent civilization for a long time. On that regard, you do know about the war that with the Burmese in the late 1700s, to
No.
where the king of Siam in Ayutthaya decided to stop firing the cannon because it upset his family, and they lost. They stopped their guns. They would rather keep the peace than to defend themselves. And it took the Thais 15 years to get their government back together. And they never did get all the gold back. And so, in that regard, the weaponry has not been a part of this culture. There never has been. For instance, even in England, there's still the tradition of taking your shotgun out and go pheasant shooting.
Yeah.
and whose land does it belong to? Or who owns the land? And is this the crown land, or can you hunt here? Or if it's crown land, be careful hunting
it's
here.
so strange how they were. It's crazy how pheasants were bred and imported to England just for the sake of killing them.
Mm-hmm. Well, the same thing was true about the beaver and felt industry in the Americas. It was all based upon guns and killing and whatnot like that. Where the Thai society, the Thai culture has not ever been armed. It's not that, oh, grandfather used to have a gun. No, grandfather's grandfather never had a gun. Here in Thailand, you probably know this, the police that are armed had to get a permit and buy his own guns.
And I know there is ownership.
Yeah, one of the ways of getting a gun permit is because you need one, and being a police is about the only reason that you could get one of those permits. So it's also true that a policeman then can get a permit for someone if there's enough reason for it. 50,000 baht, I hear, is the going price.
Oh, yeah, that sounds ripe for corruption.
Yeah, but $1,500 US, that's about 1,200 pounds. That's steep.
Yeah.
So that means that still only those who really need or have a reason from it. And they do have gangs that have guns in Bangkok. They collect them and put them on television from time to time. There is that that element here. But it's not very big, and they usually guns on each other. And generally not. That if they have a Farang, they'll put him basically is in league with the tuk-tuk drivers. And so you get a tuk-tuk driver, and he's not going to take you where you want to go. And so that's all of that sneaky kind of stuff that happens in Thailand. But let's get back now to the fact that there is fear everywhere. Wouldn't it be really great if you could just walk anywhere you wanted in Thailand and had no fear at all?
I don't know. I mean, if there was no fear, wouldn't I just stay here?
Yeah, but not because of fearlessness. It's because you got a whole lot of other stuff out of the way too, including don't have no place worth going.
Yeah.
Because you don't want anything. That in fact they're mixed together. Because a lot of fear is the fear of not getting what one wants. But if you don't want anything, then you're not afraid. And if what you have is too much, then when you lose something, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, good point.
An example of that is a man who has one daughter. If that daughter dies when she's 5, 10 years old, he's going to grieve. But if he's got 24 daughters, and one of them dies at the age of 5 or 10, So this is the way that we begin to look at it, is that if it's dear to us, then we will grieve, whether it is another person or a material possession. For instance, if you've got 2 good laptops and you choose which one you're going to use, and then one of them breaks, you say, meh. But if you've got one laptop and it breaks, it's, ah! You see where I'm going with this? Okay, it has to do then with the way that we attach to our material goods, and this is instinctual. But there is training now that we can go through to come out of these instinctualities. And in fact, the clinging to the self that gives rise to fear also gives rise to anxiety and is generally the expression of anger. Okay, but when we exhibit the when we take a look at the procreation instinct, this one is normally associated with wanting things, of greed, of wanting the girl you saw, of wanting a bigger house to be feeling secure, wanting things that we can have, and then we want things that we can't have, and now we're suffering because we can't have what we want. But what we want is we want it because we want to feel secure. So in that regard, learning how to be secure without material possession and being fearless is almost the same thing as not wanting anything, because we already feel good, we already feel secure. But they're tightly wrapped up like that, and they're down there at that instinctual level. So what do we begin to do about it? That's the question. What do we do about this stuff? Because if we don't do something about it, it continues to run our life, just like it's running everyone else's life, that we run by instinct. Well, guess what? We're not all animal. We're not all instinctual. Humans have something new that the other animals don't have so much of. And that is this frontal cortex, this ability to see things clearly and to see things directly. And that the process of bringing that part of the brain online is what we call in Pali sati, to wake up, to look at what's going on, to see what's happening. And that one of the things that we can begin to take a look at is this instinct and instinctual behavior and how it kind of runs our life. I have, by the way, started to talk about the 4 woeful states almost by accident, because they fit in. The 4 woeful states are, in fact, when we fall into a form or a mode of clinging, then we go into the corresponding woeful state. that is instinctual at its base. All right. So that means that when we feel afraid, we react to it in anger and anxiety. And that means that we're getting hot. And so that's the representation of the hell world. We're being reborn in hell because we're trying to protect the self by getting angry. Something very deep inside has automatically figured out that a good offense is a good defense. And so we become offensive in order to be defensive. Well, when we follow that to its natural conclusion, we can say that, well, wait a minute, every war that's ever been started has been started by a preemptive strike. Whoever gets the most afraid or the most greedy starts the war by blaming him. I had to go after him. If I didn't go after him this morning, he'd go after me tonight. That's the mentality. That's what anger is all about. And it takes over and places us into these hell worlds. The procreation instinct that's associated with greed and holding and owning material possessions, hopefully in the service of getting good feelings, like from a girl. So we buy her presents, we give her things, that kind of thing is part of that, which is the greed. When it gets really over the hill, then it becomes what in the Pali is a pita, which means a hungry ghost. And basically the representation is like a huge pot with a very, very tiny opening at the top. So that the ghost is like the mouth of the ghost is small compared to the body of the ghost, so that no matter how much the ghost sucks, it doesn't get enough nourishment. Okay, which gives rise to the point that many people will go around saying that their life sucks. Well, of course it sucks. That's because they're sucking on it. If they stopped sucking, life wouldn't suck. And why do we suck? It's because we want something, we want to be fulfilled. So that's a hell state or a woeful state that is called the preta. And then the animal world is the animal, which we've already talked about, but we'll talk about it again in the sense of we're animals when we go along to get along. This is the herding instinct, that we do what we're told, we try to fit in, we become members of society, etc., like that. And you see this with meditators on a regular basis about how should they meditate, because they're trying to fit in to the group in their mind, the invisible group of excellent meditators. They want to fit in, they want to join, they want to be part of the in group, in the know kind of thing. Except that it leaves people in the feeling of unsatisfied. Is clearly the way that it works. But one of the ways of looking at it, if we take about out to the level of Freud or the modern psychology with Eric Berne, and look at the parent, the child, and the ego, or excuse me, the superego, which is the parent, the id, which is the child, and then the ego, which is the adult. That Freud knew about this thing, and so did Berne. And Berne put it really, really succinctly when he's talking about that the parent ego state goes around telling the child what to do and how to do it. That it's the parent ego state. Well, he's got it really well labeled, because this is, in fact, the instinct that's the nesting instinct, which is where we got all of our rites, rules, rituals, ceremonies, and fatherly advice. And it's stored in this area of the mind that we call the superego. And so now the superego is going around giving you instructions about how you should do things. This is your history, in fact. This is it. Not the really deep, deep stuff that is the instincts themselves, but what we've done with our own history is to build up a set of shoulds and oughtas, and this is the way to do things. And also the part that's stored in there is, how do I evaluate myself? Or what is the opinion of the parent towards the child? Is this kid a loser? Or is he something to be proud of? Either way, the parent ego state still maintains I'm the one in charge. If I'm proud of him, then I'm going to push him in that direction. But if I'm not proud of him, I'm going to push him in that direction. But how I push him is the one that runs the thing, not the child. The child has to merely respond to how he's getting kicked around. And so we live our whole lives that way, kicking ourselves around. Instead of letting that child feel really good, we teach it intentionally to feel bad, to feel like that we're the loser. Because even the winner is a loser when the winner has to put up with what you would call maybe a stage mother or a helicopter mom.
Yeah, helicopter parents. There's a good one. I say it's good because I think it comes back into what you mentioned with Thai society, where it's the mother who's the driving force of the household as opposed to the father. I know this is a popular term in China too, but the tiger mom. Tiger mom, yeah.
Yes, exactly so. In the West, there's not very many matriarchal societies. To a degree, and in the older days, the Jewish society was matriarchal. And you can still see the remnants of that with the way to determine whether a kid is Jewish or not is whether or not he's got a Jewish mother. The Jewish mother, the Jewish mother is the one who makes her kid Jewish. Fathers don't make a kid Jewish, moms do. Okay, so the remnants of that matriarchal society is based there. But in any case, whether it's patriarchal or matriarchal, children store up all of these ways of doing things into our history. And so now the history is going around telling us how to live. An example of that is, oh, you ought to go on a diet. But the child then says, I like the food, I don't want to go on a diet. And the parent says, I see you in the mirror, you look terrible, you go on a diet, and now you've got a conflict with inside the person. And they don't go on a diet, but they feel guilty now. But if their parent ego state is saying, hey, what a waterfall you are, I love you, I love you, I love you, then the kid's not going to lose anyway, and he's not going to feel bad either. It depends upon our old history. And it also depends upon whether we can see this history in operation so that we can put a stop to it. So we're kind of doomed or bound to our old history, which in many ways within religious context resembles destiny or providence or you're going to go in a certain direction. And there was a movie, I think it was called Groundhog Day.
I like that movie.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Groundhog Day, it doesn't matter. Every time he gets up, it doesn't matter what he does to try to make it change. It winds up with the same deja vus over and over again. Okay. So that's in fact how we are programmed with history. So James Joyce was absolutely right at the level that he was talking about. And he probably didn't even understand the depth of his own insight, because all he could see was how it worked in political world.
Well, the modernist writers, including, I have T.S. Eliot, including T.S. Eliot, They often wrote a lot about moksha, but never about nibbana. They were more informed on Hinduism than Buddhism.
Well,
But
okay,
then
I'll
again,
be honest with you. Nibbana is overrated. Moksha is the big deal. That in fact, without moksha, you can't even have nibbana. As long as you don't have freedom, we're always running. Let us say imagine that you and I are both escaped slaves. Is that real freedom, or are we on the run? No. But if one of us is an escaped slave and the other one has papers saying that I'm a freed man, then we're going to meet every new opportunity and every new person. We're going to think about the situation completely differently because you're on the run and I'm free. So people that I meet, I can be cool with them. And you're ready to run. In that regard, this is what we mean then by nibbana comes only when there's real freedom. Because after we quit running is when we can sit down and take a nice rest and cool off.
Yeah, okay.
You can't sit down and rest and cool off and get in nibbana when you're still on the run. And that's the other way of looking at it, that nibbana is actually just the end result that we've stopped running. And that we've stopped running because there's no place to run to, that we're free from the things that we were running either from or to.
Can I ask you a question about it's about the sense. I don't know how to really put it into words, but the idea of in a heavenly rebirth, when that karma is fully used, and then the falling down, so to speak. I was thinking of this in terms of heroin addiction or some kind of drug addiction, and the fact that there's so much pleasure there in their life, which cannot be compared to anything else, the form of dependency on it. But there's only so much amount of kind of physical pleasure that they can have in that action before it kills them.
Physical drugs is an interesting topic that we could go off on a side trip. Why don't you remind me that later?
Okay, it just reminds me of like a ball that's on fire, and either it can what's the word, be completely immolated, you know, or it can, you know, like you said, smolder, right?
Okay.
Can smolder and then be allowed to cool down over a long amount of time, or it can, you know, just and then gone.
I have remembered some Hindu language that talked about that also in regards to the spiritual path. And that is that there's the slow, easy, and then the quick, sudden explosion kind of thing. Even in Buddhism, they talk about it in the sense of there is the fast and hard, there's the quick and easy, there is the long, tough slog, and then there's the slow and easy.
That's what's the Thai phrase? I can't remember what it is. Something like slow and easy, right? On how they treat things.
Yes, the slow and easy. And that the slow and easy is actually the best way to do nibbana. The quick and hard is almost like that you've got. It, that's also an interesting topic, um, along with the drugs, because they actually are interrelated. What I'd like to get back to, though, is just to finish things off about um, the woeful states and how they fit in with the four modes of clinging, so that when we're actually in a particular mode of clinging, there is that place for it, and that is like the materialism is greed, or when there is fear due to feeling attacked, then it brings up anxiety and anger, which is the hell state. And then we were talking about the animal world, is where we are herding together or going along to get along and do what we're told to do, and how that then puts us in with the storage of that stuff in the super ego, that we stay kind of riding herd on ourselves by having that super ego continuing to tell the child what to do. Now, you think about it in your own mind, if you go along with that whole point, oh, I ought to do this, or oh, I ought to do that, or you got to go downtown, you got to go do this, and all of that kind of stuff. All of that's coming out of that super ego, or the stored history that we have. Because everything, I got to go to town, or you got to go do this, or whatever, is all based in the recent storage of the history storage. And we're a slave to it. We become a slave to our own history. And the way that that history is stored for each individual one is within that part of the brain that is actually a conceptualization. So when we conceptualize our feelings, it winds up for many people being a new rule or a new task or something new to do. But what we're doing with the Anapanasati is we're beginning to work directly with those feelings. The feeling of, oh, I got to go along to get along. And then there is the one more, the last one on the list, and this is the Ashura. And the Ashuras actually are warrior gods. They're about the same thing as the Titans. So when we're born in the woeful state of a god warrior, basically the warriors, they know they're going to lose. It's a loser's mentality. And so they don't want to go to war. Here they are all dressed up and no place to go. That's basically what the Asura state is. And that's based upon the territorial instinct, in the sense of going back to the example of the guy who is a fan of this particular football team. He wants his team to win. His team is losing, but he cannot go out onto that football field. He can't go out there. He's powerless. He can't fix it. And so he's there chomping at the bit. I got to go, and I can't go. And this is the state
that get so antsy.
And we get really antsy. And that's why you find so many people at the polls on election day. That's that antsiness. I got to go. I got to do something. I got, I got a job to do. I've got all of these feelings to deal with. And so I've got to carry the banner. Now, remember that word banner that I just used, because the Buddha talks about when one's mind is free, when our job is well done, when the mind is polished, pure as a polished shell, in other words, the top of it, then we think of it rather than as instincts or as the four modes of clinging, or even in the world of the woeful states. Here we're talking about it merely symbolically. And so when the mind is right, when the job is done, the job that was done was putting down the weapon, putting down the cross. That's the procreation instinct, putting down the weapon, becoming unarmed. The second one is filling in the trench. The filling in of the trench is actually the territorial boundary, or the division between the nest. But we build moats, or we build trenches for fortification. But when the mind is right, when for and against are forgotten, then that boundary between them is forgotten. We fill in that trench. We fill in that boundary. Okay? The next one is the banner that I just mentioned. Hang on to that banner. The banner is, in fact, if you think about it, the military banner of a particular regiment, which means that if you're under that banner, you belong to that group. Well, look at this. Every country you know has a banner or a flag, and they're generally well represented so that everyone within an area around that country knows that country's flag. An example of that is you probably know the British flag, and you probably know the Thai flag. You can just take images of them, okay? But you are not Thai, and you're not British. Those are mental states. You can imagine the American flag, but you are not under the American flag. You are not American. You're a human being. And humans, as far as I know of, we don't have a flag that designates human. Maybe if there is one, is that a picture that Leonardo da Vinci drew, which shows the guy in the with his arms stretched out like this, sort of like doing snow angels.
Yeah.
Okay, but generally we don't have one. So the whole idea of putting the banner down means that I'm not identifying with anyone anymore. I'm not a Democrat, not a Republican, not an American, not a British, not a Christian, not a Buddhist, not a this, that, or the other thing. Why? Because any time that I attach to a group, now, however they feel as a group, I'm bound to feel that way too. Why am I bound? Because I just bound myself to it. I'm under their banner. But if you're not a Democrat, and when the Democrats flub up, it's just entertainment. But if you are a Democrat and the Democrats flub up, now it's me that's flubbed up, and I can't do anything about it. I'm a Shura. I'm a warrior all dressed up and no battle to go to. And then the fourth one, which is the very curious one, the one that's my favorite, and that is that the door is no longer locked or barred, that the door is open. Now, what that actually is getting to is the door to the heart are going right down to the instinct of self-preservation, that we become defenseless. Why? Why do we become open? Because we're fearless. There's nothing to fear. Generally, what's to fear is what I'm identified with. So if I don't identify with anything, then the opposing forces to that is not going to attack me. If I'm a Democrat, then every time the Republicans attack the Democrats, I feel attacked too. But if I'm not a Democrat and the Republicans attack the Democrat, it's just good fun. It's entertainment. So the unbarring of the door is an even deeper point, that we're completely fearless, that our door is open. There's nothing to hide. If death comes through the door, I can't lock the door and keep death out. Death knows how to come through broken door, or knows how to break down a door and come right in. So there's no reason to try to bar the door for death, because he's going to come in anyway. But we still feel like we need to protect ourselves. Just like you mentioned about your cell phone when you're going into 7-Eleven. That's your protection, right? Why do you need protection? Because you feel like you need protection, and that feeling is a feeling of unsettledness, insecurity, fear. But if you would think about it, there's nothing in here to be afraid of. I can take a deep breath and walk right into this 7-Eleven like a man and even find something I might like to buy. In a way, you can think of the fear that you're having now that you're using the cell phone for was basically the kind of feelings that you developed as a child. And so as a child, you may have picked up a stick because you felt insecure. Or you might have picked up a mommy. Mummies are easier to use for protection than sticks are. But that's the way, is that when we're children, we want protection. And so we seek out protection from others in that way. That's the socialization that we have. But once we start paying attention to what the mind is doing, we begin to catch these things. We begin to catch these instinctual behaviors. We begin to see our materialism. We begin to see our going along to getting along and the herding instinct. And then we begin to see how we're attached to outside organizations, groups, clubs, associations, whatever like that, so that we don't identify with them anymore. But this takes some work because sometimes, you probably have been attached to one political party or another. And in fact, in Thailand, that's a very, very easy way to become unattached to the politics of England. Absence in that regard does not make the heart grow fonder. Out of sight, out of mind is the rule there. And so that's a good rule then, is to begin to keep these things out of sight so that we keep them out of mind. And if we bring them to mind, then they're in sight. So we throw that out. So we can begin to see any of those kinds of associations on the outside as a form of hindrance. Because I don't know of any organization like the Democratic Party or the Labour Party in England that has win after win after win after win until they get tired of winning. No political party has that kind of existence. No, they go from loss to loss, occasional gain, they like this, and then they've lost again. And so when we identify with those groups, we feel that loss. No need to do that. No need to attach and feel association with any organization at all. Not in an attachment way. This is one of the four modes of clinging, and it's really a common one. So when we see how these four instincts work together to find into the four modes of clinging that then determine the four kinds of unwholesome, woeful states of mind that we fall into when we're following these modes of clinging, give us what? The determination to stay out of that. The determination that I'm going to become free from that. And so talking to you today about the four modes of clinging and the four woeful states and the four instincts, this helps the student really put together basically what the job is. This is the picture of what the mind really is, and it's based upon that James Joyce point about the history. Our own personal history determines who we are or who we're going to be as a destiny. You know, the Christians have an idea about free will. Is there free will?
It differs, right? Is it Calvinism? Is that the word? There's two sides.
I've heard of the word Calvinism. They're the ones that says God loves you if you're rich. Or if God loves you, he'll prove it by making you rich.
I can't remember. I did learn about it in university. Calvinism and is it free will?
Mm-hmm.
Or predestination, sorry, predestination.
Predestination is, in fact, your destiny. You are predestined, or is providence, that your future is determined by your past. He who lives by the sword dies by the sword. Okay, so that's what that whole point is. But you're beginning to see very clearly for yourself that you're not bound by the destiny of your history. That you can come out of that. Your choice. You can either live by the cycles of karma, or you can come out and make a whole new set of choices about how you're going to feel. You don't have to feel the way that you're in the habit of feeling. You can feel the way you want to feel. Isn't that marvelous? Wow, what an invitation. You don't have to feel the way that you've been in the habit of feeling. You can feel the way you want to feel. The question is, well, why do we feel bad? Why is there that habit?
It served a purpose for us.
It served the purpose of keeping us alive. It serves the purpose of survival. That's what it's all about. But right now, survival is not the issue. Is it?
No.
No,
Well,
survival is not the issue now.
I was just imagining the what happens in the mind when you're at the supermarket.
It depends. I've had several responses.
Yeah.
Generally, is let me out of here. Which generally gets voices, I'll be waiting in the truck. Take your time. But also the market could be, oh no, I can't go to that merchant. I owe him money. Or it could be something else. There's a wide variety of choices for what you could have in the market. But generally, I guess that the reason that people go to the market is because they want something. And so now they're having thoughts like, is this good enough? Is this worth the price?
Yeah. I think there's an interesting... I'm not sure how far back this dates, but the old Disney movie Pinocchio and the idea of the carnival as some kind of hellish existence.
Oh, yes, there's a song about it that begins the thing before they get to the carnival. And that is, hi, diddle-dee-dee, the actor's life for me.
Life.
Yeah. So that's based in greed, but it also has to do with the quality of seeking freedom in the wrong places, or looking for love in all the wrong places.
Yeah, you've mentioned.
You've heard that song, huh?
Yeah.
All right. But getting back to the issue of will for a moment, and that is that we're faced then with this dilemma. Are we going to follow our past, which is going to have a great deal of determinism on our future because of our habits and because of the way that we think is based upon our history? Or are we going to become free from that? And if we are making the determination to become free for that, then we have to put in consistent right effort. And the consistency has to do with the fact that these instincts are so strong that they keep coming back up. And every time they come up and we see them, we can recognize them that that's a hindrance. These old ways of feelings are a hindrance to how I would like to feel. And so we start intentionally cultivating the way that we would like to feel when we're feeling like we're on top of the world. In that regard, that consistent over and over and over right effort is a price that we have to pay for will. It's not free.
In a sense, that's the dana, right?
Okay.
That's the giving away of something.
Giving the one's right effort. Exactly. I would see what you mean by that.
Or at least I think maybe sometimes in English translation, um, I can't remember anymore. Actually, it's just the give renunciating.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, renouncing.
Mm-hmm. The word renouncing, it has the quality of um, using the same root word as the word enunciation is actually a pronouncement. So
Hmm.
a renouncement or a pronouncement is an open rejection or a declaration of avoidance or a notification of quitting the tribe. That's what the word renunciation means, that it's an open thing. It's kind of like intentionally breaking the cup just to make sure that you can't use it anymore. A lot of people don't want to do that kind of renunciation. In fact, uh, much of the quality of the ordination of a monk in the Theravada tradition is that quality of renunciation. And it has many little ceremonies that are associated with it, including shaving the head and wearing the white clothes and all of that. You've probably been to ordinations already in Thailand. If you haven't, give yourself
Yeah, I
a,
have.
okay, quite a joy. Uh, and the moms are always really happy. She's the star there. So, getting back to the punchline now of the joke that's taken me 15 minutes to tell, and that is that will is in fact there's a price to pay for it. It's not free. So I call it expensive will
Mm.
because it is not free will. There is no such thing as free will. There's either you follow your old habit patterns or you take the effort that it takes to come out of them. Is it worth the effort? You darn tootin' it is. It really is worthwhile. And so when we recognize that it's worthwhile, that's also, I hadn't even thought about that, but that's part of the understanding the worthwhileness is that this is the Buddhist path. This is knowledge and vision of the path that we're following that is, in fact, worthwhile doing in a way that no other path is worthwhile doing like this. So this is in the area of knowledge and vision of what is and what is not the path. Is a real eradication of doubt, including the doubt would be, is this really worth the effort? Because it actually takes quite a lot of effort to get to that point. And once we've put in that kind of effort, one of the knowledges that we have is, yeah, the effort that I've been putting in has been working. I bet it'll continue to work if I continue to put in the effort. And so this is why that part of it is also associated with confidence, that our doubt is eradicated because we know that it's worthwhile coming out of the
Yeah,
old
yeah.
habits. I like it when the students do that. That shows insight. I don't even care what insight you got. You got it. Okay, so let's draw this one to a close and we'll finish with putting all of this stuff together. But if you'll think about it, this is actually just one little aspect of the Paticca Samuppada. Is this place of grasping and clinging, because there's only four ways to do it. That's actually a miracle. There's only four things that we've got to deal with. And here I thought that all of this stuff was in there. No, it's got groupings and whatnot like that, so you can understand it down to just four levels. And so when many Western Buddhists and younger Buddhists they talk about attachment, they don't understand that in fact there are fortunate attachments. That these four modes of clinging are not there, but I'll give you a list of things that are worth clinging to. This present moment. clinging to taking a deep breath, clinging to the Four Noble Truths. In fact, we become dedicated to hanging on to this path. Another thing that's worth hanging on to or worth clinging to is friends. Keeping friends for the long term. Friends are just like wine. They get better with age. Unless you leave one uncorked. So don't leave your friends uncorked. So there's things that are worth clinging to, but these four modes of clinging are very succinct. We know exactly where they're coming from out of the past. We can see how that stuff works, how it begins to build personality, but that you are not that person. You are not that personality. You would be that personality if you had no choice. The personality, in fact, is just following along with the history. But once we come out of that and we do it, not overall for a long period of time in a great big way, but we come out of it every time we think of it. And then out you go. And then you come back in. And then you remember, and out you go again. And so it's kind of like a teeter-totter. It's up and down and up and down and up and down. But pretty soon, the weight of the power of sati and the skills that you're developing begin to rebalance that teeter-totter so that it becomes easier, almost effortless. In fact, the Buddha talks about it as being energizing. That the things that used to, the efforts that we took that used to be fairly hard to do, are now just so simple. That last in breath that you saw me do, that was just so simple to do. So this is a way of continuing to practice over and over and over again. And you can see that any hindrance that you have can be put into the frame of this four modes of clinging, including our history. Staying out of the past. A good idea. One last point. If you are in fact practicing the Dhamma correctly, you're naturally gaining a better attitude, a higher position, and let us call it a higher moral viewpoint. But when you were in your history, stuck in your past, you did not have the same high moral standards then that you do now, which means that your history is not up to your new current standards. Which means every time you remember something that you did that doesn't come up to your present standards, and what are you going to do? Feel guilt? Feel remorse? Or are you going to be able to say, "Ha! Boy, I'm glad I'm not doing that anymore." And so that would be the way, because that's in fact, aha, I see you. Aha, I see you. And then we throw that thought out and we come back. Oh, I'm so glad I don't do that anymore. And so this is how we practice over and over and over again to gain that will, that power, that can-do attitude, that strength of mind. It can be developed. Any more? You got anything else?
Let me check. No, I think we're done.
Okay. Yeah. Let me check. 3 passengers on an airplane all sitting together. The guy in the middle is a priest. The guy on the other side is a rabbi. On this side is a Buddhist monk. They were all talking about religion, and suddenly turbulence came. And all three of them simultaneously did, that part, that stuff.
Yeah.
And the priest looked at both sides and said, "What are you guys doing?" And the old Jew says, "Oh, just checking. spectacles, testicles, watch,
Yeah.
and wallet.
Yeah.
And he looked at the Buddhist and he says, well, what are you doing? And he's saying, oh, is my mind open? Am I well behaved? Am I breathing correctly? Is my heart open? And so I genuflect you good night.
Okay. Thank you, Dhammarato.
Okay, bye-bye.
See you next time.